when Yaniv and I were discussing the details of which night, so I didn't realize when we decided for Sunday night, tonight, that till afterwards, that tonight is the yurtzeit, the Azkara for my father, my second yurtzeit. It was also an Adar Aleph Vav 2 years ago, and so therefore I decided. Also, we have a friend over here whose father passed away 9 months ago, Avner ben Baruchov. The Neshama should have an aliyah, Be'ez Hashem, Ner le'echad, Ner le'meya. If we light a candle for one, that's the way it goes with ruchniistic things, spiritual things. They don't have to be divided. It's not a zero-sum game. There's plenty for everybody. So Be'ez Hashem. So the tonight's share decided that for Ili Nishmas to learn a Mishnah. And since it's my father, decided maybe we'll learn a Mishnah in Perkei Avot, father. So in honor of my father's memory, I'm going to share, we'll take a look at, sometimes Mishnah in Perkei Avot looks very, very simple and deceptively simple. But the truth is, the sages said things, they said great things, many great things. It's like a star, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says. If you look at it from a distance, it looks like it's a little thing, twinkle, twinkle, little star. But anybody knows a little bit about the nature of the cosmos understands that the closer we get to a star, like the sun, it's a whole giant burning universe. There's a fire, a giant fire, almost an endless fire, something incomprehensible. So the same thing, we take a look at a Mishnah, it looks like something that might have fallen out of a fortune cookie or something like that, something that Aunt Tilly could have made up while she was stirring her chamomile tea. But when we take a look at the depth of what they said, they were hiding very, very deep and great, beautiful and wonderful practical secrets inside the words. So the Mishnah I'd like to take a look at in the first chapter goes like this. And it says, Yeshua ben Prachia, Omer, he says the following thing. Osei lecha Rav, make for yourself a Rav, a teacher. Konei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. V'havidan es kol adam lechav schus, and judge everybody to the side of merit. Very, very nice. It's a beautiful Mishnah. It has 3 different parts to it. And we'll take a look at a few different perushim, a few different explanations of what each part means separately. And also we'll put the pieces back together and we'll see what they mean collectively, what the whole thing means together, the whole package. What the ingredients mean separately and what the whole thing, how it all fits back together again. And it's interesting, it's always divided up into 3. I saw a very beautiful, amazing mimer from Reb Simcha Zisel, the Alter from Kelman. He said the following thing. He says that Torah mechalekes l'shlosh chalakim. It's a small little sefer called Tenuas Musar. It's actually 5 volumes. But he has over there one-liners from different Gedolei Musar. And one of them it says over there, it says, Torah mechalekes l'shlosh chalakim. Torah is divided up into 3 parts. And when he says Torah, he doesn't mean only Torah, he means life. Life is divided up into 3 parts. And what are those 3 parts? He says, Pashtus, simplicity, Amkus, depth, Vipashtus, simplicity. When I first saw this statement, I said to myself, isn't that interesting? That 2 of them are exactly alike, and one of them is different than the other. Pashtus, simplicity, Amkus, depth, Vipashtus, and simplicity again. Sounds like it's a little bit of a joke. 2 of them are exactly the same. So I was wondering, what does this mean? Pashtus, simplicity, Amkus, and Pashtus, and simplicity again. And I was thinking that it's hauntingly similar to a similar question that we say when we're benching at the beginning of every month. Before the month begins, we say a blessing for Rosh Chodesh, and we ask, the whole community pleads together, and we say that it should be a month that has Yirah Shamayim, fear of heaven. And then it says in the list of things that we're asking for, we say Osher v'kavod, wealth and honor. And then later on, we say at the end of that list over there, we say again, the Yirah Shamayim. And it's not my question. Others have asked also, why do we list 2 things that are exactly the same? We're asking for Yirah Shamayim and Osher v'kavod, honor and wealth. And then She'ein bo bushu klima, doesn't have any embarrassment in it. And then we ask again for Yirah Shamayim. Like my wife sends me out and she says, don't forget to get bread and orange juice and cream cheese and get bread. What kind of one was whole wheat? The other one was white bread. What's the difference between bread and bread at the beginning and the bread at the end? So what's intended over there? So I was thinking the same thing, the blowing of the shofar. we also have a similar pattern. There's a straight pattern, and then there's a broken pattern, and there's a straight pattern. We find this all throughout, right? Same thing with the matzahs. We have the two straight ones on the outside, the whole ones, and then we break the one that's in the middle. Find many, many different examples throughout all of Torah. We find a similar type. Then we put it together. We eat them separately, and then we make the Hillel sandwich in the end. So I was thinking, what is this pattern? That you have a straight and a broken and a straight. And I was thinking like this, that there's a certain pashtus that comes before amkus, that comes before, there's a simplicity, there's a yirah shamayim that comes before a person has an experience of osher v'kavod, great success, or even busha and klima, or even before somebody has an upset or a disappointment in life. And there's a yirah shamayim, there's an experience of yirah shamayim that comes afterwards, right? Every little school child goes excitedly to school the first day. He goes to lick the honey. There's a custom that a child goes to the Rabbi the first time wrapped in a talis, Chassidim, and they lick the honey of the letters off the page. And that child is so excited. Oh, look at this. I remember when my youngest son, who just became bar mitzvah, Baruch Hashem, but when he went to yeshiva for the first time, he was watching his brothers and sisters get on that yellow bus. He was so excited. He couldn't wait for his chance to get on the yellow bus and go to school. And I called my wife and said, how was his first day of school? He says, I love my Rebbe. That's what he said. And the next morning, my wife wakes up early in the morning. She sees him. She's already got his knapsack on, and he's already facing the door. Who knows how long he was standing there? He couldn't wait to get on the bus to go to school again. My wife says, so cute. He wants to go to school. He can't wait. And I said, as we say, halavai weiter. It should be continued to be that way. We only hope. Same thing, Chas and Kala, they're standing on like on top of a wedding cake, and everybody's very excited. And every time they walk into a room, everybody's singing, oh, Yisham, Mavi, Yehuda, yeah. And then 3 months later, 5 months later, they get a taste of reality. Maybe somebody caught somebody crying, and why you're crying, and maybe they had their first little, because for weeks they were going out and they were saying, you like Yerushalayim? I like Yerushalayim. You like Shabbat? I like Shabbat. And everything was very nice, and everything was very, very simple and beautiful and wholesome. But now all of a sudden they get into the amkus, the depth, the complexity that comes after the pashtus. The first part was a gift. So what is that second part? What is that second pashtus? What is the second simplicity? If a person only listens to the shofar, only to that first sound, that first blast, there's that simplicity, that beautiful, that almost naive experience of Yirah Shamayim that comes when a person experiences a first Shabbat, or the person gets the first taste of something tov or of a davening, and suddenly they feel the hum of their neshama, and they say, wow, or they get turned on to a Gemara, and they said, this is exciting, you learn a Mishnah. But then you get in, you find out that it's not so pashut afterwards. It takes a lot of thought. Learning Gemara is not so easy. Now you're getting into the Amkus. So the first one is almost like a naivete, and the second one almost seems like we're being upset. We were set up in order to be disappointed. And people can become jaded at that point. They can become very disappointed. So the third pashtus, the second pashtus that comes afterwards is something that we have to work to put the whole thing back together again. This is a pattern in life and a pattern in history, that there's a pashtus when you put the whole thing back together again, that with a pashtus, with an understand that there's an amkus. Anybody learned a Mishnah understands that a Mishnah looks simple at first. And then you learn the Gemara that comes after the Mishnah, and you realize how difficult it is. But then in the end, if you learn it well enough, you're able to put it all back into the Mishnah again and appreciate its simplicity, even with an understanding of its complexity. So we'll take a look at the Mishnah over here in Pirkei Avos, and we'll understand 3 different parts. First part, very, very simple. Aseh lecha Rav. Make yourself available to a Rav. Make yourself available to a teacher. Teacher's not going to come to you. Person has to pick himself up. I'm preaching to the choir over here. People came out on a cold night in order to hear a lecture. I often say, if I wouldn't be standing here lecturing myself, I wouldn't come. But here you did it. You came out in a freezing cold night in order to learn Torah. Oseh lecha Rav. Make yourself available to the Torah. Make yourself available to a teacher. That's the simple meaning of it. It's important for a person to have a Rebbe. My wife and I are making shidduchim calls now. Does he have a Rebbe? It's very, very important. Does this boat have a guidance system? Does he have a GPS? Can he be guided? Is he coachable on where to go? And does he have somebody who has that type of supernal knowledge in order to guide him? Oseh lecha Rav. Doesn't have to be the biggest Rebbe in the whole world, but somebody who's been there and done that, somebody who has the experience of breaking into the Gemara, someone who has experience who wasn't married yet to teach you how it is to be married, or someone who didn't raise teenage children to teach you how it is to raise teenage children. Somebody who married off children to teach you how to go through the steps and the processes of marrying off children. All of these different things, they all need coaching, and we need osei l'charav. Make yourself available to somebody who can teach you, who can guide you. Can't presume that we know everything on our own, that we're so smart. It's a big danger, it's a big sakana. That's the first meaning. But there's another meaning, osei l'charav. Make for yourself a rav. I sat with a Rabbi today in yeshiva, one of the top Rabbeim, I think, I don't want to give away too much information over here. A top personality who's explaining to parents. He's telling you, your son needs a tutor, he needs some tutor in Gemara. And he's explaining why I got into teaching people, why I got offered positions to do other things, to teach higher Gemara classes, but I want to teach a Haskalah Gemara. And the reason why he wants to teach the beginning of Gemara, he wants to give that key over there, because when he sat there at that age, he didn't understand what the Rebbe was talking about. And it was mystifying to him. It was frustrating for him. And then when he finally came later on in life, he persisted, and he was able to break into the Gemara. He says, I want to teach people how it should have been taught to me. Osei l'charav. Make yourself into that Rav. And I reminded him, I told him, I said, we have a Rebbe that was in the yeshiva where my boys went to in elementary school. And they called him Rebs. He had like a cool name. He was a cool guy, Rebs. Rabbi Blobstein. And all the kids would gather around him. They loved him. Every time he walked in the hallway, it was like a whole group of people, a whole crowd of people. He was the most popular Rebbe in the school. Rebs. And my wife's friend once asked him, how did you get to be Rebs? How did you get to be Rebs? How did you become Rebs? And he said the same thing. He says, my whole life I went to yeshiva. And I didn't find a Rebbe that related to me. So again, a person become jaded, a person become cynical, and say, nobody does anything, and nobody knows how to relate to me, and nobody knows how to talk to me. And instead of taking it like that, osei l'charav, he took it the other way around. He says, let me become that Rebbe to other people that nobody was ever to me. Osei l'charav, you become the Rav. You become the solution. Very easy to say, nobody does anything. But to say, if nobody does anything, there's an opportunity for me to do something, for me to become something. Osei l'charav, make for yourself the Rav. You become the Rav. You become that person that nobody's become yet in the community that somebody needs. You be the friend to that person that nobody has a friend, that doesn't have a friend yet. That you wish you had. Osei l'charav, you become the Rav. That's another meaning. Then we skip to the second part. Konei l'chachaver. Mishnah advises, v'konei l'chachaver, acquire for yourself a friend. How important it is to have a friend. Not only you need a Rav who tells you this is what the formula of this is what you need to do, this is what you need to work on. But you need a friend, you need a jogging buddy, a coach, someone who you can call up, someone who can partner up with, who can tell you, let's go out, let's do this thing together, let's learn together. A Rebbe can tell you to learn. He can tell you to learn Mishnayos, he can tell you to learn Halacha, he can tell you to do something, but you need a partner. It's hard to do things. It says in Kehelis, Tovim Shnayim min Echad. Two is better than one. Rashi says L'chol davar when it comes to everything. Everybody needs a friend. It's not easy to do things on your own. You want to go exercise? It's good to have a friend. You want to go on a diet? It's good to have a friend. You want to learn Gemara, you want to learn Chumash, you want to become something, you want to improve yourself, it's good to have a friend. Somebody you can check in with, somebody who can give you a little bit of correction, a little bit of encouragement, who can pick you up when you're down, who you can pick up when he's down, because he needs a friend too. Konei, it's also a choir, very interesting. It's worth paying for to have a friend. Sounds very disingenuous, like not real. You got to pay for a friend. It's worth paying for a friend. Buy him a cup of coffee. You get yourself a donut, get him a donut. You buy yourself a sefer, buy a second one, buy him a sefer also. Konei l'chachaver, it's so valuable that it's worth paying for. Buying a chavrusa. Having somebody that's going to put up with you. Not so easy. I had a chavrusa, I remember, I never forget, some of my best chavrusas were so mean to me because I needed it. I needed it. What can I say? I remember when I was learning in yeshiva, every time the door opened up, I used to turn my head to see who was coming in the door. And on a chavrusa, he says, is there a connection between your head and the door, like a string? Every time the door opens, your head turns in that direction. I told him I'm a very sociable person. He says, that's very nice. You're a very social person. You like to, wave to people like you're a talk show host or something like that. Very nice. He says, but you're here to learn. I said, okay. And he made sure that, part of me wanted to look up, but he zeroed me in over here. And if I complained about anybody else, the same fellow would tell me, turn the microscope on yourself. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I guess that's what I needed to hear. And another chavrus, if I show up late, and I tell him, oh, my kid kept me up last night, so I came a little bit late today because I was, I needed the extra sleep. He says, you want Hashem to take away your excuses? I said, no, thank you. He says, don't make excuses, just come on time. I said, okay. And it was very tough, and it was brutal, but the truth is, that's a good friend. A good friend is somebody helps you take the medicine that you need to take. A good friend is not somebody, sometimes he gives you encouragement too when you need encouragement. Like a wife, it's an Azer Kenegdo. It could be it's an Azer that sometimes Kenegdo, but it's a help. Everybody needs a help. And it's a very practical Eitzah. Kanei lachachaber, you acquire for yourself a friend. So we need somebody who can guide us and somebody who can teach us to keep us strong with our program. We should stay with our program. Not just for a day, a week. Right? Everybody after the New Year's, everybody goes on a diet and then they lose their diet. Everybody, takes on, they're going to start to jog and they stop jogging. They join a club, and the membership persists for the next 5 years, but they never go to the gym. So to take on something and to go along with it and to stay with it for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you need a friend. You need a partner. But there's another meaning. There's a secondary meaning. I'm going to introduce you to one of my best friends over here. And that is, I have two best friends. Koneh, Chazal tell us, is a pen. Let your pen be your friend. I have two different pens. And here's the highlighter. Go through a sefer, buy a nice sefer, a new Siddur, a new Mesil Yesharim, a new Gemara that's not, like the Chosin Shas that you don't want to really, touch up too much. And you go through and you start to highlight. And you're shopping for friends. You're looking for Maimon Chazal, a statement that jumps out at you and that touches you and changes your life. The Pizetzer Rebbe says that it's possible for a person, in a sefer called Derech HaMelech, he says that it's possible for a person to achieve Nevuah B'zman Hazeh, prophecy, nowadays. He says, but not a prophecy that looks into the future. He says, because that ended by the time of beginning of Bayis Sheni. He says, for the last 2,400 years, by design, we've been a non-profit organization. But he says, we're talking about a different type of nevuah. He says a nevuah that sometimes he says you're looking into a sefer. A Ruach HaKodesh, a person's looking into a sefer and suddenly something comes out and it jumps off the page and it touches you in a way that it transforms your life and it turns you into somebody or something different that you never expected. This word, he says, starts to shake you and starts to shake inside of you in such a way. He says, and it doesn't stop until it transforms you into a different person. He says, what's happening? He says, somebody else, you might have even seen that line before, you might have even touched it before, but you just glanced over it this time, other times. But this time somehow it grabs hold of you. He says, what's going on over here? He says, it's a form of Ruach HaKodesh. A Ruach HaKodesh in such a way, he says, the same way the Kohen Gadol is looking at the Urim V'Tumim and the breastplate is lighting up. And he says, and the Kohen with Ruach HaKodesh is able to get the signal of exactly what needs to be done. He's getting advice from Hashem. He says, and the Kohen who doesn't have Ruach HaKodesh is looking out from the side, he doesn't get the same signal. He just sees stones, blank stones. Same thing when we're reading a piece of Torah, and suddenly it's a Rashi, it's a pasuk in Tehillim, and suddenly it lights up in front of us in such a way, and it changes our life. He says, what's going on over there? He says, that's the Torah that's speaking to you. The Torah is talking to you. And we daven for it every day. We say, after Shmon Esrei, we say, Shibonei Beis HaMikdash, Meherav Yameinu. There's a lot of speeches end like that, but only one time did I ever hear it. The Siyam HaShas, I was wondering, when does everybody finish up a speech with another line that we say? Right then, we say, V'sein chelkeinu b'Torasech. He says, that's our portion in Torah. That's the Torah that's talking to us. So, Osei L'charav, Konei L'chachaver, Konei L'chachaver, sometimes you take that highlighter, and suddenly you're out shopping. Emes Kenei, Ve'al Timchor, Shlomo Melech tells us. Acquire the truth. So we're going through and we're shopping for it with a highlighter and we're finding piece of truth. And the other thing is, you take out this little object over here that's called a pen. Pen tishkachas Hashem lakecha, lest you forget Hashem. Pen avarsh ben ganavti. And then you take out another little booklet over here. Oh, I have a whole bunch of these I just got that are called Hashgacha Pratis journals. Unbelievable. Keep your eyes open and things happening. You might forget about them and then you say, oh, I'll always remember what happened over there, and you don't remember. So write it down into a book. Another little book, you write down an idea, interesting idea, floats into your mind. And you think, oh, I'll remember that forever. But if you take 3 minutes in the morning and you write down, Konei lecha chaver, or say, you've acquired for yourself a friend, let your pen be your friend. It's much less expensive than a psychiatrist, and it probably works 10 times better. Be aware of your thoughts. Be aware of your deeper thoughts. Ask yourself questions. What do I want to accomplish? What are my top 10 goals? What is most achievable in my life? What's the next thing I need to do? Who do I love? Who loves me? What gives me a feeling of accomplishment in life? Ooh. What gave me a feeling of accomplishment today? What gave me a feeling of accomplishment this week? Something I ask at the Shabbat table every Friday night. And we get an interesting array of answers. One kid says, I got an 86 on a math test. And I says, oh, that's not such a great math score. He says, but I'm not so good at math, and I worked hard, and I thought I was going to fail. So 86 is exciting. Bum ba da dum, bum bum ba da dum. So we sing every Friday night. We ask, what do you feel accomplished by this week? Always find out it's something that was difficult for that person to do, and you find out where your battleground is, where you're fighting your battle. And it might be different for somebody else. We had an older bacher, an older fellow from Or Sameach one time on a Friday night, and we asked him, what was your greatest feeling of accomplishment this week? He's a 40-something-year-old fellow, not married yet, and he says, I had a nice conversation with my mother. Bum, 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 bum. That was good for him. Another fellow, a very sweet, swarty fellow, he said, I said the whole Sefer Tehillim every day this week. Whoa, 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 whoa. The whole Sefer Tehillim, wow. Another fellow sitting next to him, his friend, he said, I made it to Shacharit 3 times this week. Bum, 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 bum. So for him, that was his Nisayon, that was his test. And he did it, he accomplished it. Sometimes asking yourself a good question. What was my victory? What do I feel privileged? What do I feel that I feel grateful for? Appreciating small things, right? That the car started, that the coffee was hot, that there was milk to go into the coffee. That I found my gloves. This morning I found my gloves, okay? We needed them. So, Osei lecha rav, konei lecha chaver, that's a different explanation. And then the third part is, v'havedanas kol olam l'chavschus, and judge everybody to the side of merit. Sounds like a very nice idea, and it is a beautiful idea. Havedanas kol adam l'chavschus. So one thing, it's just telling us that it's very important to judge people in a favorable way. The second parish might be the explanation of exactly how to do it. It's not such an easy thing. Because we're looking at people and we see people, it's very easy to find faults. And we see people, but it's hard to see what's going on. We don't know the entirety of a person's life. We see what they're doing. We see somebody rushing through a crowd, he knocked over somebody's door, and he's trying to get, we don't know. It's hard to judge exactly what's going on. So what does it mean, Havedanas kol adam l'chavschus? So in those words themselves are the explanation. It doesn't say to judge every person necessarily. It can be read like this, Havedanas kol adam l'chavschus, which means, Havedanas kol adam, look at the entirety of the person. If you look at the entirety of the person, and we don't know the entirety of the person. Havedanas kol adam l'chavschus. I saw the Sfas Emes says that the word mitzora, which is the disease, the person who gets a disease, spiritual disease, that manifests itself on his body for speaking lashon hara. He says it comes from the word. It's a contraction mitzora from motzei ra. He quotes the Medrash that the person isolates the ra. They found only the ra in that person. But they didn't see the great challenge that individual has to go through every day. If you look at the entirety of the person, take a look at the struggle that person has to do what he's able to do in order to get there, what a yetzer hara he has, and how much resistance he has to overcome in order to accomplish. If we take a look at the entirety of the person, we would say we'd stand in awe of that person, and we judge him in a different way. But the tendency is to isolate the ra and to focus on it, just to take a look at that one little prat over there and to say, oh, look at that. But if we try to list even in a student, it's very, very important to list what are the milas, what are the great attributes that this person has, that this student has, that this person has. If you start to list people's attributes, you'll come to a different picture of who they are because you're not isolating the ra. Everybody has a fault line. Everybody has something that they need to work on. And therefore, if we take a look at the entirety of the person, we get a greater picture. But now we come to this very important thing. We take a look at, 3 different exciting and practical points. What does each part of the Mishnah mean separately? But now we put it back together again. And let's take a look and think for ourselves out loud now. Which one of these is not like the other one? Why are they parked together? Why were they seated together at the same table? You go to the chasana and sometimes people are making up exact seating arrangements. So who we're going to sit next to whom and why we're going to sit next to whom. This is a relative that came from out of town, and the relatives that all came from out of town are all going to sit over here at this table. And anybody that's a brother or sister or cousin is going to sit at this table. So why were they seated over here next to each other? Osei lecha rav, konei lecha chaver. V'havidana is called l'chavschus. Which one of them seems dissimilar, different than the other ones? And I think, what do you say? Number one, number two, or number three? What do you say? Number three. I think we can get a universal agreement that number three seems a little bit different. The first two start out very, very nice. Right? Osei lecha rav, konei lecha chaver. This is what you need. This is part of your self-improvement program over here. Very, very nice. You need a rav, and you need a friend to help you get there. Those two sound good. And now all of a sudden it's talking about other people. What does that have to do? What does that have to do with the first two? So I'd like to offer three different explanations, three different approaches. And the first approach goes like this. Sometimes it's difficult for a person to find a friend and to find a rav, and that find themselves being isolated and feeling isolated. I don't have a rav. Well, we said make yourself into the rav if you don't have it. Or konei lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. But the person can get into such a mindset that they're judging. I had a rav, but one time I saw, he looked at me askance. He corrected me harshly, and I said, oh, he's mean. And then this one had that fault, and then that one had that fault. And this one was this one was overweight, and this one didn't know halacha so well, and that one, I find a fault with every one of them, and I passled every rav, and I passled every friend. And because I'm not judging favorably, so then the person ends up bereft, he ends up in the absence of a friend and a rav, because he was looking too harshly at people, looking too harshly at them, even at the rav. Couldn't find anybody perfect enough to be his rav. Couldn't find anybody perfect enough to be his friend. Found a psul in each one. And therefore, who's the loser? The person ends up losing out himself. So sometimes the way to acquire the friend and acquire the rav is havedanas kol adam lachavschus. It's a key. If you're saying, I can't find it. So you know what? So instead of putting on the microscope on everybody, put on the telescope. And take a different look. And you see, this one is good. I need a rav. When I need gas for my car, I don't have to get the perfect gas station and the perfect gas station attendant. It's a practicality. Getting married too, it's important. No one's going to find perfect. No one's perfect. But you find somebody. Somebody help you get to where you have to go to. Somebody knows a little bit more than you, has a little bit more experience. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Sometimes too, you can't plug your shaver into the sun. You got to plug it into something that's the right electrical power that's not going to overload you. So therefore, we have to look with a generous eye. Another approach. Sometimes a person finds his rav, and he finds his friend, and he's in the yeshiva, and we got a good group. We got a great group. This is who we are, and he finds his identity. It's unbelievable. We're great. But those other guys over there, they don't have it right. It becomes like a intramural sport over here. This sadly funny. Remember years ago, I went to Hasidic Tish. I used to teach English as a second language in yeshivas in Muncie when I was a bacher myself. And some of the kids who I taught, they saw me on a Friday night by this Rebbe's Tish, and they all came over to me. Lebelem is here. They all crowd around me, and they said, "Du bist chassid? Are you a chassid?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." I said, "What kind of chassid are you?" I said, "I'm a chassid of the Rabbanu Shalom." Okay, that was my. I hope it's true. Sometimes we have our group. We have our yeshiva, we have our shnit, we have our thing, and we do it. But those other guys, they don't know how to learn musar. They don't know how to learn halacha. They don't know how to learn. They don't know. They don't have the right rav. Their rav doesn't know. They don't have the masorah. So even after I got my rav, and even after I got my friend, I have to be careful. Havidanas kol adam l'chavschus, because they found something which is good for them. Because there's an important word over there is havidanas. I'll say lacha. It's for you. It's something that fits you. That's your shoe size. That's your style. As long as it's Torah min hashamayim. It's not something else. It's not some other watered down version. Konei l'cha chaver. That's a chaver that's for you. That matches you. That's suiting you. But that's what suits you. But something else might suit somebody else. And that's okay too. As long as it's Torah min hashamayim. As long as it's Shabbos. As long as it's kashrut. As long as it's the real thing. Coca-Cola. And if it's that, so that's what's good for them, and this is what's good for you. So, okay, Havidan is called Adam l'chav schus. And then we come to a third parish over here, a third approach. And this third approach goes like this. It says, Osei lecha rav. The first two are talking about work on yourself. It's a mandate. The person has to work on himself. Adam la'amal yula, the person was created to work. It's an interesting thing. I can see all of you. The only one that I can't see is me, right? You all see me, and I see all of you. But nobody sees themselves. An interesting thing. Person doesn't see himself. Baal Shem Tov has a premise like this, that sometimes we see something in somebody else that we disapprove of, that irks us, that annoys us. Not in principle, but something that's it grates us. And he says, the reason why it bothers us, he says, the Kodesh Baruch Hu put it there to teach us that there's something that we have to work on ourselves. That's the premise. It's a very hard thing to swallow. But the world is a self-portrait. Osei lecha rav v'konei lecha chaver means you work on yourself. Everybody's got to work on himself. I got to work on myself. Unless somebody hires me to be their rav or connects with me to be their friend, Havedanas kol adam l'chav schus, then I have no business introspecting and looking into and playing the role of the drill sergeant to that person. That's their business. I'm working on myself. And I'm not busy working on other people. I'm working on me. And there's a tendency in the society, there's a tendency in the world that people are busy working on other people who they don't have any ultimate responsibility for or any control over, and they feel like it's their job to work on other people when they have not yet perfected, and they haven't not yet worked, and they have not yet improved themselves. And sometimes in avoidance of improving themselves, they're busy improving and working on and noticing things about other people. It's a mental disease. And it's a deep shortcoming. So the Mishnah tries to turn everybody's head around correctly and tell us that if we want a better world, then there's one thing that we ought to do. And what is that? Osei lecha rav. You work on yourself. Konei lecha chaver. You improve yourself with whichever methodology we spoke about before. And as far as everybody else is concerned, Havidanas kol adam l'chav schus. And an interesting thing begins to happen. That the minute the person begins to work on himself, and those faults begin to disappear, then automatically becomes he's Havidanas kol adam l'chav schus. He begins to see other people in a better and a more improved light. Suddenly the blemishes have been removed from his eyes, and he begins to see other people better. Like the fellow that went to the famous museum in France, the Louvre. Maybe some people heard of the Louvre. I went there many years ago myself. I don't remember what I saw there. I saw great paintings. But apparently this American fellow came, and his French counterpart was showing him around. You know, oh, the Louvre, oh, Monet, René. The Mona Lisa, I think, is parked over there. Oh, a lot of great famous paintings. Oh, the best. And the American guy was like very unimpressed. Yeah. And his French friend was telling him, you know, like, what's it? He says, these are not good paintings. He said, not good paintings. These are the greatest. These are masterpieces. The greatest art of in humanity. How can you not be impressed? He says, they all have milk on them. They all have milk on them. These are guarded, precious paintings. These are priceless paintings. He says, you have milk on your glasses. Yeah. If you have milk on your glasses, so you're going to project, you're going to see that everything has milk on it. There's something wrong with that painting. Clean off your glasses, suddenly you see something cleans up on the other side. I remember taking a friend of mine, his father, to the airport. He was down from Arkansas or something like that, a nice, cute southern accent. I was taking him to the airport, and I was trying to drive. I was putting on the defrosters, I was spritzing, and I still couldn't see out the window. And I remember he said to me, this is like 34 years ago. The fellow said to me, he says, Leib, remember the southern accent. He says, I think the dirt's on the inside. And I never forget that. He was telling me about the window, but I heard it's about me, you know. The reason why you can't see is because you got to take out the schmutz, the dirt on the inside. You know? Sometimes when we start to get rid of the stuff that's inside of us, we start to see the world differently. It's an interesting thing. The Maharal has an unbelievable insight. I have an insight into the Maharal's insight. And he says the following thing. There's 6 questions a person's asked after 120 years. I'm not going to go into the whole subject over here. Number 1, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, we're asked, Masu matan b'emunah. Did you do business with emunah? So the Maharal explains over there what's being tested was the person, he says, a no-sain, a giver, or a makabel, or was he a taker? Because the goal of business, I'm sure some people agree, is not only the bottom line of receiving, it's providing a good product. And therefore, if a person's trying to take more out of something, more out of a partnership, more out of a business deal, then he's greedy for himself, and so he'll win some little business deals, but in the end, he'll lose. He didn't do it honestly. He didn't do it with emunah. Emunah means you provide a product for somebody else, you do service for somebody else, and you get something in return. Masav bat mi'emunah, it's a test where the person's a no-sain or a makabel, and he goes through each one of the 6. When he comes to, it's number 5. It says, Sipisha Yeshua. Did you anticipate the redemption? Did you see, Ani mami b'imuna shleima b'viyas HaMashiach, that Mashiach is going to come. Afal pi she'is b'meir im kol zeh hakalo. I'm waiting for Mashiach. That's really the test. So the Maharal says an interesting thing over there. He says it's a test of whether the person is koach or poel. Koach or poel. Koach means potential, but only potential. Poel means actualized potential. Was it koach or was it poel? I remember sitting with a chavrusa, and I needed a chavrusa for this. I was mystified. What's going on over here? What do you mean koach or poel? I understand 1, and I understood 2, and we managed to plumb the depths of 3. But when we get to this Tzipisi L'Yeshua, what does it mean over here, koach or poel? And this idea came to light over here. This idea that we're talking about. That if a person is sitting b'koach, if a person is sitting and they're not making the improvement, they will tend to take a look at the world in a very cynical and sinister way. If you take a look at an acorn, it looks like a petrified rock. It's a nothing. You drop it and it hits the ground and it clunks like a rock. But we understand that latent inside that little it's a seed, and inside there's a giant oak tree that will stand and it will give shade, and it will give roots, and it will give arms out and protect and hold squirrels and birds and beauty and all kinds of different things are inherent in that little oak tree. In an apple seed, in any seed, any of these things, it looks like it's dead. And if a person has not done anything to bring out the life that's inside, so they will tend to take a look like nothing changed. Like the Rosh asked at the Pesach Seder, what's going to change tonight from all other nights? It's still the same old, nothing ever changes. The world is dark, the world is difficult, the world is unrealized, the world is hurt, the world is bruised, the world is dying, the world is going crazy, the world is, the sky is falling. And it'll never get better. And you hear, and you feel. But the minute you take a little effort and you begin to shine one little facet, you put that thing in the ground, and suddenly the seed opens up and it starts to give a little root. A person takes some area of his life, in some small achievable way, and begins to improve. He loses that weight. He gets into shape. He begins to learn a Mishnah. He begins to do Shmirat HaLashon. He begins to learn Daf Yomi. He begins to open up and crack into the Gemara, and now you begin to feel the Tainag Ruchni, you begin to feel it. Now you look at the world, you look at yourself, and you say, it's not yet accomplished. But it's possible, and it's possible with Yagiyah, with work, I'm going to get there. Pardon my appearance, work in progress. And the person projects that on the world, and he sees a not yet improved world. And suddenly, since the world is a self-portrait, the person begins to feel, Tzipisa Yeshua, that I'm anticipating that there's a hope for the world, because I feel hope within myself. That hope that beats eternal within inside the person. But if I wasn't able to conquer that, I wasn't able to make any victory within myself, to have that nice conversation with my mother, to say over, to be consistent in getting through something and connecting with a Rav and a teacher and a friend and making that improvement, then I'm cynical about the world too. I don't see it's a possible world. It's an impossible world. But the minute we begin to make any success, we begin to feel that suddenly the world is possible. Tzipi shel Yeshua. Ani mami mimuna shalema. Im kozel achakelo, I'm waiting, I'm anticipating for the world to get it. And I'm waiting for me to get it in more areas and more areas and more areas. I can't wait to conquer another area. Can't wait for that feeling of victory, that feeling of accomplishment. There's nothing greater than the feeling of accomplishment. The whole world was created for that feeling of accomplishment. Nobody can give anybody anything, Rabbi. I'm not just talking about politically, and I'm not talking about economically. But the most injured people on the planet are the people that receive everything. That wait for a government, that wait for somebody to give them a check. The whole world was created, and the whole effort of this world is because the Zohar said something of Nahama de Kisufa. What's Nahama de Kisufa? The bread of shame. Baruch Hu could have just jumped right from this world and put us into the next world. Unbelievable? But why not? Because it wouldn't be an accomplishment. We'd be on welfare. We'd get the check, we'd get the Ziva Shechina, but without earning it. For free. Freebies hurt. Sonam Atanis Yichya, Shlomo Melech tells us. Getting gifts it's not life. Anti-life. Working for something and achieving something, that's life. And when a person feels that he's able to get that taste of life, that Tam Chaim, then he looks at the world differently, feels differently about the world. So therefore, when the person's improving himself, he begins to take a look at the world, that the world is a new world, it's an improved world. He looks at other people, he's Danev Kol Adam L'Chavschus, he begins to judge people favorably. Not yet, he's just not yet. That cousin of mine, that brother of mine, that uncle of mine, that sister of mine, they're just not yet, but they can get it. They can do it too. They have to wait for the right moment, the teachable moment for them. It's going to happen. Rather than looking at them cynically and then it's over. It's not over. It's never over. It's not over for me. It can't be over for them either. The biggest proof it's not over for them, it's not over for me. And maybe now we understand. I'll just share with you something that happened a number of years ago. I got a call from a neighbor who said, Rabbi Lamb, she was teaching history in a local, wasn't quite a yeshiva, something like a hippity-hop cultural Hebrew day school, high school also. And she said, Rabbi Lamb, they just finished a unit in history, and I'd like to ask you to come speak to them in order to to reward them, you know. And so I said, okay, fine. High school students, high school seniors. No big deal. I said, okay, fine. I'll come on down. So they arranged I should come on down to this event. So I came, found my way in New Jersey into the school, stopped in the parking lot, and I'm going to tell you, Es Chataya Ani Mazkir Hayom. I have to mention usually I prepare before I come. I have notes. I have to think, who's the audience, what do they want? I figure I'm going to go speak to high school students. What's the big deal, high school students? High school students. It's like I have to prepare to wrestle with my 12-year-old son, my 13-year-old son. I can wrestle him down to the ground with one finger. I can tickle him down. I don't have to do any stretching out exercises or any strategies. He's already maybe getting a little bit big now for that, okay? But a couple of years ago, I could just and then so he'll be on the floor. I don't need any serious moves. High school students, big deal. So I started preparing in the parking lot from the car to the classroom. But when I met the teacher in the hallway before entering into the class, she stopped out in the hallway and she said, Rabbi Lamb, I have to warn you. These kids are smart, and they know they're smart. And it set a panic in my heart, because I remember there was always these AP kids from high school. There was always these, with the thick glasses and they were advanced placement. They already had 17 college credits going into, leaving high school. They had invented computers before there were computers. I remember a couple of guys like that. There was one guy, he was a statistician on the baseball team that I was playing on. He had the pencil protector and 500 pencils. We used to drop a pencil on the floor, and he'd bend over and pick it up, and all his pencils would fall out. And then we'd put them back in, and then we'd drop another pencil on the floor, and he'd pick. But the guy was a genius. His eyes, he lit up with numbers and statistics and all kinds of, the genius types. we were struggling with chem, and he was, and he was already, he was giving already tutorials. Crazy. I said, uh-oh, I'm walking into a room filled with these little geniuses over here, and I got nervous, real nervous, I have to admit. So I composed myself, and I realized there's an old football aphorism. Vince Lombardi, the old, from the Friedrich, from the previous generation, Hu Hai Omer, he used to say, the best defense is a good offense, okay? That's what he said. Actually, it's a Gemara in Brachos that says, "La'olam yargiz adam yetzer tov al yetzer hara." The person should instigate his good inclination against his bad inclination. It could be that's why we pick up the cup in the right hand of water and we put it into the left hand, even if you're a lefty, and you pour it over your right hand, because the right hand is saying to the left hand, "I'm employing you." The good side has to tell the opposing side that you're going to work for me, and that's how it goes. So I come into the class. And I take a moment and I pause on the board, I write on the board my name, Label Lamb. I come into the classroom and I decide instead of standing behind the desk, I'm going to stand in front of the desk. I have this up close. And I asked them, okay, who's the greatest person of human history? Who's the most important person in human history? Hands start going up, and he said, Avram Avinu. I said, very nice, Avram Avinu. Av Hamon Goyim. He's the pillar of Chesed. He start giving all the reasons why it could be Avram Avinu, but we say, I'm sorry, you didn't get it. Not. And they say, Yosef HaTzadik. Oh, he saved the Jewish people. Yaakov Avinu was the chosen. Okay, Yaakov Avinu, very nice. And he was the chosen. He had 12 tribes. No, but not him either. Okay, fine. Who else? Ish Emes, Zerah Emes. No, Titan Emes, Yaakov. No, that's not it. Moshe Rabbeinu. Oh, Moshe Pepel Darbabo. He speaks to Hashem face to face. Mikam Novi Moshe. Oh, there'll never be another Novi like Moshe. Oh, who could be greater? Onav Mikol Odom al Panei Adam. And the answer is no, not him either. Okay, David HaMelech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. I can prove to you how most of Jewry is coming from David HaMelech even nowadays. No, but not him either. Okay, they got mystified. I knew they were lost when they started guessing, whatever, Woody Allen and David Ben Gurion, whatever it was, So they were lost. And I said, what's the most important moment in human history? And they went through a few, Yetzias Mitzrayim. Oh, Laman Tizkor, Yom Seischem Eretz Mitzrayim, Kol Yimei Chayecha. We remembered all the days of our life. No, not that. Matan Torah. I said, that sounds like a good guess because, Haniya Kadavar Gadol Azez, anything like this ever happened? Or Nishma Kamohu, Hashama Am Elokim Medaber Toch Eish, Kasher Shamata, like you heard. Has it ever happened, such an event like that? Vayechi, and you lived? No, but not that either. Okay, coming into Bias Rishon, Bias Sheni. No, and I knew they were desperate when they started guessing when the Mets won the World Series, whatever it is, they were lost. And they were looking, they mystified. I said, now I'm going to show you who's the most important person in Jewish history. You ready? I marched back to where I had written my name on the board on the way in, and I drew my name, my circle around my own name. I said, the most important person in Jewish history is Label Lamb. So what? Label Lamb? We never heard of you before you came in today. I said, that's it. I said, but now I'm going to prove it to you. That little 8-second obnoxious lunch bell rang at that time, and later on the teacher told me that they usually in the lunch have already benched by that time, by the time the bell finishes ringing. But they were watching me go left, they were watching me go right. This was a proud moment for me, even though I didn't plan it to happen this way, but they're waiting to see, how am I going to prove it? And I said I can prove it from a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, in Masechta Sanhedrin, that says, they asked the following question, Lama nivra odim yichidi, why was man created singular from all the creatures on the planet? And the answer that the Mishnah says, everything was a gaggle and a herd and a flock and a group and some kind of a grouping, but man was created singular. Lama nivra odim yichidi, and the Mishnah continues and says the following thing. He says, Ki chayav adam lomer bishveli nivra olam, a person has an obligation to say that the whole world was created for me. Ain't that something? That means just like when Adam Arishon opened up his eyes and he saw the light running at him at 186,000 miles a second, and he felt the plush green grass underneath his feet, and he saw all the colors, and he smelled the smells of the delicious fruits in Gan Eden, and he heard the voice of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, he saw Kadosh Baruch Hu shining in front of him. He says, this was all put over here, all this beauty, all this splendor was put here for me. The world was created for me. And it's not just Adam Arishon, but every individual subsequently in history, enter Label Lamb, laughing in the 20th century, also has an obligation to say that the whole world was created for me. And I told him, if you're going to go home and ask your parents who's the most important person in Jewish history, and they're going to say Abraham and Moshe and David, and they're going to say, no, label lamb, then you didn't understand what I said. I got to say me, and you all got to say you. That's how it works. The whole world was created for each and every one of us with the most important person in human history. I said, which was the most important moment in all of human history? And the answer, therefore, is now. Right now. Right? Not the day I was born, but now. Yom liyom yavia omer v'layla l'layla chavedasa machadish betuva b'cho yom tamid ma'aseh bereishis. Kodesh Baruch Hu is constantly renewing the creation, and it's a new creation. He's stakel b'raisa ubara alma. Kodesh Baruch Hu is looking. He's creating the world right now. Yotzer or uvorei choshek. All the brachas we make are said in the present tense. Kodesh Baruch Hu is creating and recreating and reestablishing and reaffirming the world right now. It's a new world. It's a new opportunity. And if you think I just made up this idea in order to torture the high school students, it's really a very simple mission in Pirkei Avos later on that says, Hu hayeh omer, Hillel used to say, Imein ani li, if I'm not going to be me, who's going to be me? Who's going to play the role of me? Who's going to be a father to my children the way I'm a father to my children? Who's going to be a son to my parents the way I was a son to my parents? Who's going to be a neighbor to my neighbor the way I'm a neighbor to my neighbor if I don't do it? It's like a giant puzzle. If you put the whole puzzle together, one piece is missing, oy vey. If I'm not going to inspire me, who's going to inspire me? If I'm not going to take care of and improve myself, then who's going to improve myself? That's what we're learning about over here today. But it's not only about me. It's not only improving myself for myself. I'm doing it for other people. And then the Mishnah concludes very beautifully. I always thought it was a call to arms, seize the day, go for it, no time like the present. It says, Im lo achshav emasai, there's no moment like this moment over here. There's also part of the puzzle, part of the fabric, is the time, is this particular time that we happen to be in right now. The intersection of our lives, the intersection of this time. Therefore, we'll finish up with one. That's what we're talking about over here. Because we're the most important person in human history. And the world was created for us. Isn't that an amazing idea? And we'll just finish up with one very, very brief, beautiful story. Maybe two. One to explain why, when a person takes a look at this, what did we say before? When he begins to improve himself, he sees the world looking back differently. They say it was a fella, came from deep in the farm country in Russia, and he never came to the big city. One time he came to the big city with hay in his hair and his overalls and the big boots and an ornery look on his face, and he came to a fancy hotel. And the fella at the concierge would have looked at him, and they gave him a room on the top floor. And every time he came, there's a half flight up, there's a giant mirror on the floor on the way up, and he takes a look and he sees this face of this fellow looking at himself. He never saw himself in a mirror before, looking at him, and he sees this guy growling at him, and he barks and growls back at them. And the fellow growls at him, and he raises his fist, and the guy raises his fist at him. He runs up to the next floor, getting closer to his room, and there on the second half landing, there's another guy. Same guy is chasing him again, also giving him mean looks and ready to fight with him. And he lifts up his fist, and this guy lifts up his fist. Everything he does, this guy is imitating. And then he runs all the way back down to the desk, and he says, there's a guy up there, and he's chasing him, and he's trying to start a fight with me. He says, who? What? We'll call, security. And he describes him. He's wearing this, and he's got this. The fellow's describing himself. So he understood. The fellow at the desk understood. He says, you know what? He's actually a very nice guy. You go over to him when you see him, just give him a smile, and he'll smile back at you. He smiled at the fellow. He said, okay, see, it's worked, He really is a nice guy. He was able to bring out the good in the other fellow. It was really himself and the reflection that he saw in the world. And he said there was a little boy that was sitting in class, and he was in the class. The teacher launched into a geography lesson and gave each kid a beautiful map of the whole world. And said, okay, I hate when teachers do this, but he said, pop quiz. Oh, pop quiz, And the teacher came around with something I haven't seen yet, but this is for the story, something called jigsaw scissors. They cut everybody's map that they had in front of them into a jigsaw puzzle and scrambled it on each child's desk and said, now put the puzzle of the world back together again. Kids were sitting there, trying to figure out what sea, what ocean, what continent goes next to the other, and very confused and having a hard time and grumbling. And then there's always that one kid who says, finished. It's either a crumbled piece of paper or he's really got it. And they look over and this kid, he's got the whole thing. There's the whole map right there. Ooh, how did you do it? Teacher comes up, Shimon, how did you put the map together? You must be excellent. You must be a genius at geography. He says, actually, teach. He says, I'm not so good in geography. I hate geography. He says, then how were you able to put the map together? It's, nobody else was able to get even, one part of it done. And look at how much you did so quickly. He says, I'll tell you the truth. He says, while everybody else was studying the map, he says, I like art. I like to draw. So I was drawing a picture on the other side, a picture of myself, and I drew like, I saw you coming with the scissors. I turned it over, so I wouldn't get caught. And then you cut up the map and you put it into pieces. I said, you know something? You know what I'll do? I have an idea. I'll turn over the map to the other side, to the picture that I drew. And there was a picture of me on the other side. And when I flipped it over, there was the world. When a person's able to put himself back together again, that's our job. Chayav Adam Lomer Bishvili Never Olam. We're able to put ourselves back together again. Then we'll discover that there is a possible and improved world. We'll see something good that'll be shining back at us, Bez Hashem. So wish everybody lots of hatzlacha. And Bez Hashem, we take some of these ideas to heart. Hopefully, Bez Hashem, it'll hopefully be an Ili Nishmas for my father, Avram Hirsch ben Shmuel, and also for Avner ben Borcho. Did I get it right? Okay. Thank you very much.